Hi everyone. Hi Mark. This is Steve Wall here, musician, actor, and general cad about town. Or as somebody described a friend of mine in Galway years ago, a natty dresser and a man about town.
Well, there you
So
go. That
I
take
like that.
take that. Come here, thanks a million for joining me on this. Say huge fan of your band over the years, and I told you a story there before we started about was supporting you many moons ago out in Greystones, and our band did a cover version of "Bring Up a Storm."
Yeah,
Kind of an interesting one to do, but anyway, if I
yeah,
if I got through that and you're still talking to me, that's absolutely fine. So
yeah.
thanks. Wait,
No,
Steve,
it's always an honor an honor to be covered by anyone.
come here to me. When you were kind of a young fella growing up, was where you're destined, like where you are now, do you think that was kind of where you were destined to be, like, performing?
Um, Probably, I suppose, in a way. I was so kind of smitten by music as a kid. Um, Especially the Beatles, because the LPs were all in the house that I grew up in. For a couple of years, I grew up in, actually, this house here that I'm living in now was my grandparents' house
Right.
in Harold's Cross in Dublin, and so when we were kids, we lived here for a while with them, and so it was full of records, all from my aunts. I've like six aunts, and there was the Beatles, the Kinks, Dusty Springfield, Motown records. Then my mother was into sort of jazz and classical, so there was like Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, and some great classical records as well. I wasn't particularly interested in them at the time, but came around to it. And then there was like my grandfather was mad into the crooners, so there was like Perry Como and Elvis, of course, um, Brooke Benton, uh, Andy Williams,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And there was some great Cole Porter records as well. And I always remember, as a kid, when you don't know what's cool or whatever, you just like you hear a song and it just connects with you. You just think that's a great song. And I remember I loved all those Cole Porter records because the lyrics were so clever. And then when I started listening to the Beatles records, I was absolutely smitten. And I think I kind of knew somehow that I was going to end up playing music in some shape or form.
And did
It,
you? I
it,
mean, was there but like was there a time, like, I suppose that moment of kind of being immersed in, say, the Beatles and that wide range of music, but was there kind of a time you kind of started picking up instruments, or was it kind of like, how did that evolve for you?
yeah, that was. I remember my dad picked up a secondhand guitar in an auction somewhere down the Liberties, and brought it home, and straight away myself and Joe were kind of on this, and taking turns on it. And we started out with a Beatles songbook. Actually, we had a songbook that was, I think it was called the Beatles Complete or something, but it gave the little chord diagrams. I mean, I knew the melodies and the words of all the songs backwards, but this gave the little chord diagrams where to put your fingers. So just gradually, by that painstaking process in the beginning, picking out the chords and getting the rhythm, and then that's how we learned, basically with the Beatles songbook. And then we sort of upgraded. Then we started getting into listening to Led Zeppelin, and I got the Led Zeppelin songbook as well. And it was a bit harder now, because Jimmy Page is a hard act to follow. But I remember like learning off, and you learn things because there might be little tips in it, tune the E string down to D, and you go, so that's how he does it.
Yeah. And come here, and kind of for your pals and kind of your surround, you in school and whatever, were you known as the kind of the performer? Like, were you kind of the ones who were playing, or was it kind of a private thing at home you did?
Well, not really, because I had just started secondary school in Dublin in Temple Oak College, and then my father decided that he wanted to move back to his hometown in the west of Ireland, in Ennistimon, County Clare. So his mother signed the family shoe shop over to him, and so the whole family ended up moving down to this small town to take over running the shoe shop. And myself and Joe went to the Christian Brothers in the town, and my sisters went to the convent, up to the nuns. And it was a very, very different scenario. A very different scenario. This was the late 70s in Ireland. It was kind of like going back in time 50 years. And it took a while to settle in. But once we did, like, it was amazing. I look back on it as an amazing experience, and I've got very strong links
Yeah.
to North Clare and to the town now.
That that must have
But
been.
it was a test, you know.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that must have been bizarre to say, like, kind of preteen heading into secondary school, finding the Beatles and Zeppelin, and
Yeah, yeah,
in the Harold's Cross, close to the city, all the buzz,
yeah.
and then Ennis Diamond. That's a culture shock at that age.
Yeah, I felt I felt really cut off because I'd already started to make friends, like, through secondary school, that were very different from the friends I had in national school, you know. And you tend to start finding your tribe, you know, in secondary school. You find kids who are kind of interested in things that you're interested in, and you spur each other on, you know.
Yeah.
It's like learning an instrument. Like, you never really excel at an instrument until you start to play with other people, and it's when you play together that you just come ahead in leaps and bounds. And so, also in Dublin, like, we had multi-channel television, you know, so we had the English channels. We used to watch Top of the Pops, and, you know, we saw all that kind of stuff. So when we moved down there was only one channel. We had RTE, Telefisherin, and there was also, like, punk rock had started to explode in the UK and in America, I suppose, not to a lesser extent. And I was totally into this because I was tuning into, like, Radio Caroline and John Peel and all, and I was hearing the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned, and I started to feel like I was really missing out on some kind of revolution that was happening elsewhere in the cities, you know. And here was me languishing in the Christian Brothers, getting clipped around the ears for daydreaming out the window. And you know, but I think it was almost that sense of missing out that made me actually strive to do something,
Right.
you know. So like, for me to get out of Ennis Diamond, to go to college, I had no interest in the academic area of college, but I knew if I went to college, I'd meet people that with similar ideas to me.
Yeah. And what did you go and what was kind of the kind of quasi-academic route you took then? What was kind of
mechanical engineering? Mechanical engineering.
Can I just pause you there for a second? For a man who's no interest in the academic, or not interested,
yeah,
that's a fairly hefty kind of road to go.
Yeah, I have no idea how I got accepted into mechanical engineering. I mean, the main subject in mechanical engineering is physics, and physics, I think I didn't even do it, and it's mathematics, and I think I might have failed maths. So I have no clue how I got into mechanical engineering. And I didn't go beyond the first year of it because I failed that miserably. It would have helped if I went into the exams, which I didn't. I think I went into 2 of them.
Yeah.
I was good at the metalworking, though, in the workshop. Like, I made some stuff that I still have today. I made a proper vice, and the calipers and all this kind of stuff. So I was great at doing stuff with my hands, but when it came to actually the mathematics and, you know, the science, I was pretty bad. But things change. You see, then I met, I was hanging, I ended up, I didn't really hang out with all the mechanical engineers. I ended up hanging out with the art students. I really should have done art. I don't know why I didn't do that. But so all my friends were in the art department. And so one of them had a band called New Testament, and which I went to see at a lunchtime concert. So I ended up joining that band, and that was my kind of first step into music.
And was it always like, were you the front man? Was that kind of...
No, it was his band. He was the front man.
Okay.
Eamon Dowd. He went on to form a kind of a band that had achieved kind of cult status in Dublin called the Swinging Swine.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then Captain Hex. And now he's Eamon Dowd and the Racketeers. But New Testament was Eamon's band, and I joined as a guitarist.
Okay. And take me back, sort of just on that kind of during school. Were yourself and Joe kind of playing, like, was that kind of still, were those kind of formative sharing guitars, kind of that kind of thread continued through secondary school and through, before you hit college?
Yeah, kind of through secondary school. I remember, like, just playing a lot at home, you know, learning songs, and never wrote anything though. You know, it was just like trying to learn songs that I liked,
Yeah.
you know, and Joe kind of did his thing. Now we didn't collaborate, we didn't play together or anything. It was kind of like, you know, hey, it's my turn to use the guitar. And,
And,
so
and Steve,
yeah, sorry. No, it was just, I mean, it was just sort of like a hobby, you know what I mean? At that point, I hadn't, you know, intended on forming a band or anything. It was, you know, that at that age, it was just the pressure of school, leaving cert, and then on the summer holidays, we worked part time in the shoe shop.
wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine the stories one could tell from working in the shoe shop in Venice time and over summers. I'd say you met a rake of different characters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You meet a rake of them. I remember, you know, we hadn't moved down there that long, and I was still having a lot of problems understanding what people were saying to me, because the Clare accent was quite strong, and I hadn't spent enough time down there really. And my father, who's lived in London for 20 years, kind of lost his accent. He's got a very soft, neutral Irish accent, and so I remember I was putting a woman had asked me to try on a court shoe, and a court shoe was a sort of respectable shoe, like she was going to a wedding or something. So I had to like take her shoe off, and try, and it was sort of like a scene from Cinderella or something like that. You know, I was trying to squeeze this kind of pointy stiletto onto this woman's foot that was quite misshapen with bunions and the like, you know. So I was trying to force this on, and I told her, she wasn't actually an 8 or whatever, 6 or whatever she told me. So we went and got another size, and I managed to get that on. And then she said to me, she looked at it and she said, "Have you the comrade of that?" And I said, "Sorry?" She says, "Have you the comrade of that?" And I said, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" She said, "Have you the comrade of that?" And I said, "Oh, geez, hang on a minute." And I went in to my father, and I said, "There's a woman out there, and I don't actually understand what she's saying to me." "What's she saying?" I says, she's asking if he's the comrade of that. And he says, "Oh, she wants the other shoe, the comrade of that. She wants to try on the other shoe." I had never heard.
Yes.
I had never heard like the other part of a pair being referred to as the comrade.
Thank,
you know,
thank God your father was working that day as well. You would have been rightly stung if he wasn't.
Yeah. Well, they used to hate, people would hate coming in, and if say I was there in the shop, because they'd always say, "Is the master here?" And I'd say whatever I was told. To say, "Oh, he's gone down to Limerick, down to the wholesalers." And they'd say, "Well, you know, your father always gives me a deal."
Yeah.
So they'd be worried they mightn't get the discount with me, you see.
Come here, was it Galway College? Was that where we went to college?
Yeah, I went to the RTC in Galway.
Yeah. So when you joined that band, was that kind of did you get a feeling of like, oh, this is kind of nice?
Yeah, I did all right. I was really shy. I used to stand on stage. I was afraid to look at the audience, so I'd sort of stand sideways and, you know, face the band, the rest of the band. I was quite terrified actually going up on stage, and but after a while, then, you know, that improved, and we were kind of gigging around for a couple of years actually, all around the west of Ireland, small towns and dance halls. I remember we supported the Zen Alligators.
Wow.
In Castlebar. The Zen Alligators were an offshoot from Horselips.
Yeah.
And we were kind of in awe, especially Eamon. Eamon was a huge Horselips fan, and he'd seen them in the town hall in Claremorris a few times and all this. And so, and the lads, I mean, I know the lads in Horselips now, you know, and Eamon Carr lives just over there, you know, on the other side of the road. And I always remind them of that they were so nice to us, because you know, usually if you're supporting a band, you wouldn't kind of presume that you could use any of their gear, you know. And I remember we sat there, it was in the TF in Castlebar, and we watched them sound check, and we were just blown away at their musicianship. Johnny Feen, amazing guitar player and everything, and Eamon Carr on drums. And then afterwards, you know, we went up and we just said, "Hi, we're the support band." And they just went, yeah, use whatever you want there. So we didn't have to, they had, much better guitar amps than us and everything. And they were just like, yeah, use it,
Oh,
So they were just so nice, So it's great to be able to meet them since then and remind them of that time, They have no recollection of it, obviously.
and come here. So then, from that time to kind of the beginning of the Stunning, what happened, or how did that kind of emerge for you, kind of getting into the writing space? And
It was a good while actually, because after the couple of years of New Testament, I kind of felt, okay, I've done the music thing now, and because my other kind of love was theater and films and acting. That was something that I wanted to do as well. So when I left school, before I did the leaving and all that, I actually applied to RADA in London to go and study acting, and I didn't get in. I had, and probably rightly so. I don't think I had any background. I hadn't done any. The Christian Brothers didn't really do school plays or anything, so it was just really a kind of an interest that I had in pursuing that. But after the couple of years playing with New Testament, then I thought, you know what, now I'm going to give the acting a go. So I went into the Druid Theatre Company and I asked for a job, and I was interviewed by Mary Mullen, who was one of the core Druid group. They're a fantastic actor, and she interviewed me, and she just, I don't know, liked my vibe, and just says, well, you start on Monday. There's a lunchtime play on, and we'll find something for you to do. And so the rehearsal started for this Tom Murphy play called On the Outside, and I was made understudy for, I think, Melissa Stafford, one of the actors, and I had a small little walk-on part, and I ended up staying with Druid then for about 2 years, and doing like tiny little roles, but an awful lot of backstage work. I was sound operator, and I was an assistant to Gary Hines on a production, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it. I loved everything about it, all the actors and playwrights and the people I met. And just to see a play going from the initial rehearsals to hitting the stage, and the nerves of the previews and opening night, and then when it got up and running, and watching a play every night and to see how it changed every night and everything. And I saw amazing actors and made a lot of friends. And then, so I moved to Dublin after 2 years, because I kind of felt that in Druid, I didn't know if I was ever going to really get a chance to tread the boards, because I'd become quite a good sound engineer. So I thought, oh, I'm going to be up in that little box at the back of the stage now forever. So I moved up to Dublin to see, could I pursue an acting career? And I was on the dole for about a year, getting nowhere. And I used to go to gigs all the time in the Underground on Dame Street and the CIE Hall and the SFX and everything. And there was so many bands starting in Dublin. And one night, it was actually, I was in the Underground on Dame Street at a gig, and it just occurred to me that I could just start a band. It wasn't like doing an audition where you go into a room and there's like 4 people behind a table and they decide whether you can work or not. And I had just had nothing but kind of refusals. And then I just realized I can just start a band like of myself. I don't have to wait for anyone to say, now you can work, So literally the next day I put an ad in Hot Press magazine, like vocalist seeks. And I started, and I hired Aidan Walsh's rehearsal room in Temple Bar for 2 nights. And it was a great way. I started meeting various Dublin musicians who answered the ad, And but then the band didn't happen in Dublin. I was down in Galway over a bank holiday weekend, like a week later. And I just realized then that there were musicians there that I knew, like Cormac, the drummer, had played in New Testament. Right. So I knew that he was a good drummer that I also already had a relationship with. Yeah. And my brother Joe, I just knew that Joe would be a great addition to a band because of our kind of shared taste in music and comedy and films and all that kind of stuff. I knew he'd be someone that you could have it, because a lot of being in a band is about being able to communicate, and that you can communicate ideas without somebody feeling, oh, you don't want to do my idea, And I knew I would never have that with Joe and with Cormac, you know. And then, so the next member was Derek, who I didn't know so well, but he had a secondhand shop in Galway that sold secondhand records, but also secondhand musical instruments, electric guitars and amps. And I used to sometimes go into the shop and pretend to be, you know, leafing through records. And Derek used to sit behind the counter with an electric guitar, and there could be Johnny Guitar Watson or Van Morrison records playing. And he would just, like, you know, be on electric guitar there playing the most amazing guitar along with these records. And I remember the first time I went in there, I thought to myself, if I ever start a band, I'm going to ask this guy to join. So when the time came, I did that. I went into the shop and I asked him would he join the band. And that's how it came together.
And was there kind of the writing piece of it, Steve? Like, kind of, you know, obviously one thing forming a band is one thing, kind of, you know, learning Zeppelin and learning Beatles and Doors or whatever songs, but the actual then it becoming a band that you're going to do your own stuff in, was that kind of, how was that for you, first off?
It wasn't our initial, it wasn't like the main aim. I think we just wanted to play, and we had no original songs. But like Derek was also a DJ, and he ran a very successful club in Galway called the Soul Solution. So he played an awful lot of rare kind of soul cuts, and he would also throw in stuff like some African stuff like Fela Kuti and Hugh Masekela, and then maybe a bit of Hank Williams, or, you know. So it was a very eclectic kind of a mixture, but it kept people on the dance floor. And the club scene in Galway was really good at the time. It was fantastic. It was way ahead of Dublin in terms of social life and nightlife. With a great array of clubs. You had a fantastic club called the Motion Club as well, that was much more kind of arty and run by art students and cutting edge. You know, there was always black and white movies being screened, and, you know, you'd hear a lot of Joy Division and, you know, what was that band? Yellow, do you remember? There was all those kind of hits. There was the crowd from Switzerland, and, you know, and so I think we just wanted to play, and we wanted to be able to play in these kind of places and get people kind of dancing, you know, and that was kind of our aim. So we started doing cover versions of a lot of songs, say from some of them from these soul records, like Archie Bell and the Drells, Sockin' 1 2 3 4, and we would take there was a Benny King song called Supernatural Thing, and we would twist the songs to suit our lineup, you know. So we also, at this point, we'd gotten a brass section and a keyboard player, so there was 8 in the band, and the band were also, it was gas. It was almost like a scene from the Beatles movie Help or something like that. We lived in the same house. It was an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Galway. So we were all in the same house, and we rehearsed in the house. And we would take turns to cook dinner and all that. So there was music going 24/7 in this house. Yeah. And everyone had their own records, and we'd be playing music, and then somebody would hear a song and say, let's try that. And we'd go into the sitting room, you know, where we had all our gear set up, and we would start. So we just had a lot of covers. Yeah. You know, we did These Boots Are Made for Walking. We would throw in Johnny Cash and June Carter and all this. It was just this mad mix. And then we decided we'd time to do a gig. So we booked a night in the Hilltop Hotel in Salt Hill, and we put flyers around the pubs, and it was packed. And the owner of the hotel, he says, I want you back next week. You know, so we did another one the following week, and it was packed. And then we realized there was something here. People just loved it. Mm. And so that's how it started. And then original songs, then we realized we had to start bringing our own in. So that's how it was gradual.
And it's gas because there's a kind of a time in Ireland then, you know, of like the time that the Sunning were, the first iteration was kind of at its peak, was a time of great change, you know. It's kind of marked by soccer tournaments as well, but like, you know, the Euro 88 and the Italian, you were right. Because you were right in the middle of that kind of Fela, that kind of Irish explosion culture.
Yeah. So the first single came out in '88.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose at that point, you know, we were still in this sort of, well, we didn't even know it at the time, but a recession. You know, people talk about the recession. To us, it was just the 80s, you
Yeah,
know, and, you know, there was, you had no money,
yeah,
but you could still end up going out and having a few pints. Rent was cheap,
yeah,
you know, rent was cheap, and, but there was no money. But little did we know that there was, you know, an impending Celtic Tiger sort of on its way, which started, I don't know, sometime, I presume, in the mid 90s or something.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was a very kind of innocent time, and it was great. I mean, Ireland was a great place to tour. You know, the what this is. I mean, there was no internet. You know, people still had to rent VHS videos. You
Yeah.
know, so it wasn't like you had to. People went to gigs, you know, and there was times we were out 7 nights a week.
Yeah, because it was a huge. I mean, like, I remember seeing you quite a lot back then. It was a kind of yourself, and something happens, and there was a kind of there was a gigging, and particularly yourselves, like and we'll talk about it in a while, but like the no matter what size of a venue you played, it was the same gig. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like that.
Yeah,
I think maybe it's to do with your acting chops as well. I don't know, but like the sense of the audience was very much part from of stunning gigs. It's about that connection.
yeah,
But
yeah.
would that have been something like live seemed to be where you really, really lived?
Yeah, yeah, and there was always a point as well with the band that even if we turned up at a gig and if we were disappointed in the size of the crowd, or you know, if someone was sick or whatever like that, it was always, um, you know, we had to just give the same kind of performance as we would as if it was, say, on stage at Fail or something like that, you know. Um, and we always had our kind of ceremonial shot of tequila as well. We used to do that before we went on stage. We'd all gather around and, you know, and yep,
Now we're ready.
with the boards, you know.
And see,
So,
then kind of when it came to, obviously you were gigging, and Dublin again, as I presume, was a magnet for that. Like, when did you come up? Did you kind of spend a bit of time in the bag it in around that time as well? Didn't you?
yeah, we did. I think we did a 3 night residency in the Baggett Inn over 3 weeks, 3 Wednesday nights or something. I think they were, and they were our first shows in Dublin. And we'd already been playing a lot around kind of on the west coast of Ireland, and then kind of gradually coming east. So it was the opposite to what generally happened, where you had, say, a Dublin band that was being touted by the music press and all that, and then would start to put their tentacles out. This was the opposite. This was the invasion of the cultures. And at this stage, even though I was brought up in Dublin, I was a fully fledged culture. And so the invasion happened from the west. And actually, the Dublin press, or certain elements in the Dublin press, took umbrage at this. And we got some fairly stinky write-ups from
Wow.
certain elements. They'll remain nameless,
Yeah.
because we sold out the Bag It In 3 weeks in a row. And there were these little kind of snide comments from elements in the Dublin press that the place was sort of full of culchies. Now, they didn't call them culchies, they called them the people that, you know, went home to rural Ireland on the bus on a Friday evening. You know? And so, but these were the people. It was, you know, it was like, I think it was a Wednesday night or something. So they were obviously still in Dublin working. And
Yeah.
it's like our band, the Stunning, who came and played in our town in Rossgray, or, you know, Moat, or wherever, Carrow, you know,
Yeah.
they're in Dublin to, you know. So we had this amazing following, just because we were playing all over rural Ireland in small towns and all. And still to this day, people will come up to me and say, I remember the time that you played in Bunclody. She says, you know, we couldn't believe it that the Stunning had come and played in our town. And it was amazing, like, to see what that meant to people at the time, that, you know, a real band that were road fit and, you know, mad for gigs, came and played in their local town hall and blew the roof off the place. They remember that for years. That, you know, they're in their 40s now and they're still coming to see us.
Yeah.
Or 50s or 60s.
Because I do think you've named something there which is kind of really interesting about, say, the Stunning, because I think there was a wave of yeah, rural. I mean, you know, you untapped a whole sense of a diaspora in a way that we're kind of living in Dublin and working down. Sorry, living
Yeah,
in Dublin and kind of traveling or commuting or college or whatever. And I think and that kind of really, for me, looking from the outside in, kind of, you know, was there as a wave through your career, and like, you know, to those kind of seminal nights in kind of failure, there was a kind of celebration of your own triumph
yeah,
in a way, you know.
yeah. Like when we were on the first fail in 1990. We were, I think, either the second or third band on stage on the Friday, or was it the Saturday? I can't remember. So we were on really early. We were on about 1:30. Um, and Paradise in the Picture House was already number one. It had gone to number one the week before. So we were the number one, and it stayed there for 5 weeks. So we were the number one band in the country, and we were like one of the first bands on stage. But there was a crowd. I remember like the crowd that came in to see us, and there were all of these kids from all over the country who knew us because we played, you know, we played in Navan, we played in wherever, and they all sort of, was like we were their band. And it's an amazing thing, you know, and it's still there. It's still there. There's a sort of a pride in the band because we went and we played in their town. It wasn't I think there's that kind of attitude, oh, you're too good for us now, you know, you don't, you're off and you're playing in around the UK or you're in America or whatever like that, you know. But
Yeah.
I think because the study didn't really make it on that international level, we were still the band that came and we played in the local temperance hall.
And Kabir, was there a sense that, I mean, there must have been a sense for you, Steve, when, you know, your early singles, like, you know, they still stand now, and when you play them live now, they're cracking, you know, and I think they're kind of timeless in a way. But there must have been a sense, was there around a time you're kind of going, oh, this is sounding good. Like, did you know you were onto something?
No, we didn't, because I mean, I think we were sort of a nightmare for record labels. You know, we sent off demos to record labels and all that, and we always got turned down. So when it came to putting out our first album, we had no choice but to do it ourselves. And we had paid for the singles. We had put out 4 singles in a row, and we paid for them ourselves. And then because we couldn't get signed, I think the problem was that we were so diverse. You know, a record company, they couldn't figure out, you know, what to file us under, what, you know, and we weren't cool. We weren't seen as cool or cutting edge. And so we had no choice but to do the album ourselves. And in a way, that actually was a model that years later would become the norm for an artist to actually record their own record and to own it. And we did that we started recording those singles like in 1988, and we were licensing them to Solid Records in Dublin. And so we did the same thing with the album. We just went and recorded more songs, and we added that to the singles we'd already recorded. But we own the album and always have. And it's the best thing in retrospect that we ever did, because, you know, so many bands signed with international labels like Warner and Sony and all that kind of stuff. And then a year later or 2 years later had no deal and had no access to their recordings. They couldn't exploit them, couldn't do anything with them. And whereas we have them now, and we can decide even which digital platforms to put them on. Oh, I'm going to take them off that one now. They're messing us around, but we own them. If we want to license a song to a film or a commercial or whatever, we own the recordings, we own the songs, we own the copyright. And we didn't know that at the time, how beneficial that would be years later. Yeah. And now it's become the norm. But we did it back in 1990.
Yeah. And I suppose in a way then, as I say, Paradise the Picture House kind of hit a zeitgeist. You know, it was kind of a huge album in Ireland, for people of certain generations that can remember exactly what it was like back in those days. It was massive, and you guys were like a massive band, and you know, it was you're kind of churning out the hits. You know, there was kind of a run. Yeah. It was like, you know, and obviously, you know, some seminal songs within there. You know, one can't but mention brewing up a storm. And I'm delighted that I'm delighted you still have a positive relationship with that song, because a lot of bands, you know,
Yeah.
you know, more arch bands say sometimes refuse to play their ultra hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then towards, I just say, then towards kind of your second album, was that difficult? Sorry, I mean, were you kind of gigging internationally at that stage, Steve? Were you, had you kind of done much in the UK?
We had done, yeah, we used to play a lot actually in Vince Power's venues. And Vince Power had the Mean Fiddler organization. So we used to go over quite a bit, even before Paradise and the Pictures came out, when we only had a couple of singles out. Quite regularly, we would get into a van in Galway. And I remember actually our driver had Trevor, who was with us from the very beginning and to the end. I mean, he started off with like a high ace, and we used to drive over to London and that, and we'd sit in the back, sit on the amplifier. There was no seats. We would sit on amplifiers and stuff, and we'd have sleeping bags rolled up as cushions. And we thought nothing of getting into this van at our little lockup in Galway and driving all the way to London. And, you know, and then you have to go through, you know, security at Holyhead and all that, where you'd have the army taking all your stuff out, get your cases opened and checked for bombs and all of that, because it was the height of the Troubles as well. And then onwards to London. And then we had no money to stay in hotels or anything. So we used to stay in squats, where somebody always knew an Irish person living in a squat. And so we'd end up just staying the night or a few nights in a squat over the weekend, do the gig, and then back into the high ace. And drive all the way back to Galway. You can only do that when you're young, you know what I mean?
I was going to say, it's a kind of cautionary tale for anyone that wants, you know, the high life of, you know, rock and roll. Yeah, there's a kind of certain time frame that becomes something that you're kind of able to do. But then I suppose, like, there was another, you know, even though those singles were kind of, you know, had done really well, but then there was a second album which again clicked things on a pace more. And you know, didn't you support Bob Dylan kind of then in London kind of after? I mean,
we did. We had tried to release Brewing Up a Storm in the UK, and we ended up we got to support Dylan for 4 or 5 nights in the Hammersmith Odeon. So with the band, we would man all the exits after the gig and give people flyers, you know, this is the band who played, you know, who opened for him and all that. And there was the artwork of the single, and it was never going to work. You know, we didn't have a record label over there to push it or to give us any help. There was really nothing arranged around it, and it was just doomed to flop, you know, which it did. Nothing ever happened. And then we did a UK tour with the B-52s, and that was great fun. It was great fun to see them every night anyway. And that was to try and sort of, you know, go into local radio stations around the UK and try and see, did they get the single and would they play it and all that. And it's just, it was really pointless without having like a major UK label on your case pushing it. It was never going to work, you know. But anyway, it wasn't for the want of trying. So we also used to go to the States a fair bit as well. And it was all funded by ourselves. So all these trips were funded, and we'd play in New York, you know, usually where there were Irish people, you know, New York, Boston, Philadelphia. We never played in Chicago for some reason, which I'd love to have. And we just ran out of money in the end, basically.
I mean, it's an incredible story. I mean, you know, and within all that, obviously, then you go on one of the failures kind of at midnight after, like, you know, burnt the place up with after Bryan Adams wasn't.
That's right. Yeah.
That must have been an incredible feeling, like that late at that night session when everyone's up for it on you boys rock and roll.
Yeah, I remember being really nervous because we thought we were supposed to go on earlier that day, and then apparently Bryan Adams said he didn't want to be last on, and so we were approached and offered the closing slot. And I remember we were just really nervous about it because we kind of thought, why doesn't he want to know? Is there something he knows that we don't know? And we were kind of thinking, we were in the dressing room, we were arguing for and against, and I don't think we'd much choice in the matter anyway. But we kind of thought, well, after he finishes, the place is just going to empty out, and we'll be just doing our set to this sort of dwindling crowd. And it was actually the opposite. It was incredible. Like everybody, the stadium was packed, and they were all there singing our songs back at us and all that. It was an amazing moment. But we were absolutely shitless going on stage.
Are you, even now, are you able to take in those moments? Like, do you remember those, like that moment in Fail as a moment? Do you remember being on that stage? Do you remember that feeling?
It's funny, the gigs seem to go so fast because of the adrenaline. And I think we played all the songs too fast as well. But I do remember beforehand, and I remember walking through the tunnel, the players' tunnel, to get to the stage, because you had to walk down there and, being like escorted by security and all of this, and, really kind of nervous about it and everything like that. And then Bryan Adams and his band were coming off the stage. So we all passed each other in the tunnel. And Joe, my brother, who's always like the man with the quip, he kind of says, "Thanks for warming them up, Brian." He's just I never lived that one down.
And then, but I think as well, I don't think it's spoken about enough, the fact of like that you just said yourself, it was self-financed. It was a kind of, guerrilla, record putting out and gigging. It was your little industry yourselves. And what you achieved is absolutely phenomenal coming from that. That's, it's extraordinary, particularly back in I just say in those times when there was no MySpace or internet or Facebook or Twitter. It was by your bootstraps getting out there and playing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I used to meet so many bands back then as well, and artists and all who'd, you'd meet in Lily's Bordello or wherever, various places, or on the road at festivals, and they'd say, what are you up to now? Oh, it's like, we're trying to get a deal. Everyone was always trying to get a deal, and at that point, we had our relationship with Solid Records, who were doing a fantastic job here in Ireland, and they financed the second album, Once Around the World.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of singles off that did quite well. Heads Are Gonna Roll, Everything That Rises, Mr. Ginger was another one, She's On My Mind. Like, every album always had about 4 singles on it, which was great. And but I could never kind of understand with bands that were the kind of attitude was waiting to get the deal, Now, some of them, it does work for some, I suppose. But you can be quite powerless, and there was not a lot of acts who got really let down, as we did when we formed the Walls and made that mistake ourselves.
Well, maybe that's kind of obviously there's a few years between the Stunning, kind of, as you say, coming to a natural or an unnatural end, or maybe a natural end for the framework you had around yourselves. But was it a kind of a hard decision for yourself and Steve? For yourself and Joe then to kind of get back together again, and another guys? Was that kind of
well, I think with the Stunning, we split in '94 because basically we just knew nothing was going to happen in terms of getting our music released internationally. That all of those kind of avenues had just closed down, and music was changing fast as well. Our brand of music was becoming out of date. Dance music was the new future. It was all about I suppose the Happy Mondays, Stone Roses, all that kind of stuff, and then it kind of went from there. So into it just became DJs, then became the new king, once Fatboy Slim and all of that. It all changed. Even the bands then, like the Happy Mondays and Stone Roses and all that, found that they couldn't get traction, and so bands were starting to disappear. So you had DJs, and then the rise of the singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So if you remember then how things changed, because I remember after 2 years in London, coming back to Dublin, and all the hoardings around the city on the posters, they were either for DJs and clubs, or they were for singer-songwriter and acoustic nights. So there was no band
Yeah,
gigs.
there wasn't. You're right.
And you had all of these names of individuals on the posters: Damien Dempsey, Gemma Hayes, David Kitt, Mundy, Paddy Casey.
Yeah.
And I remember going, who are all these people? Like, there was no bands. So it had changed in that the venues where bands played were now clubs, and live music had become a Monday night acoustic gig somewhere. And even bands like Aslan were going acoustic.
Yeah.
Because there was nowhere for, a venue wasn't going to have a band in on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, because that was their big night to get 800 people in the gaff and pay some guy a few €100.
Yeah.
So the whole thing changed. So as a band, it became very difficult. And so we formed The Walls kind of at a terrible time, really. And now we did get signed by Columbia Records, and we moved to London. But it was changing there as well. And when the deal just didn't work out, and we left the label and we moved back to Dublin, but it was a very different climate here.
Yeah.
But yet we kind of persevered with the band thing. And I mean, it was really difficult. We had our work cut out for us.
Yeah. But within that, I mean, the Wolves had success, and in relation to, and a few of your songs picked up for movies as well. I mean, wasn't the Bright and Shiny? Yeah. It was a commercial, wasn't it? Wasn't that a TV?
Yeah. Bright and Shiny Sun ended up in a TV commercial, and then we have managed to get songs into movies as well. But again, we never got the international. When we'd always hoped that our music would get out there internationally, and in some shape or form that we would get a release, and then be able to broaden our touring horizons, because that's key to it for any Irish band. If you can't extend your touring horizons beyond Ireland, then your days are numbered, because you run out of road. You run out of road in Ireland very quickly, and even quicker now than we did, say, back in the 90s.
Yeah,
it's smaller now, and there's fewer gigs. Yeah. Like an Irish tour back in the 90s, I found a flyer in a box up in the attic for the single Heads Are Gonna Roll that was released in 1991, and on the flyer there was 22 dates.
Wow.
22 dates. Now 2 of them were in London, but there was the rest of them. There was 20 dates around Ireland, and I was looking through all of it, and I'd say out of the 20 dates around Ireland, there's probably 5 of those gigs left now.
Wow. Because I remember seeing, like, my mother's from Offaly, and I spent an awful lot of time around that age kind of down there. But I remember there used to be the GA club, the Harriers, and they used to have the disco, but the disco would stop then at 10:30, and you'd have the band, and like it'd be the Stunning, or it'd be Something Happens, or it'd be whoever, and it was a fantastic mix of old style disco, this kind of heavy rock and roll bands from. But you're right, those kind of tours don't exist anymore at all.
No.
Speaking of a live, actually, I remember seeing the Perrys at the at Slane with the U2 gigs.
Oh yeah.
Was that the day that Ireland? Was that the football day?
Same day, yeah. Jason McAteer's goal against Holland.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, I'll never forget that day. I mean, U2 were brilliant to us. They were just really good. We actually wrote. We have a friend who's a mutual friend of theirs who was in school with them, and the band U2 were in America touring, and when it was announced that there was going to be a second gig in Slane Castle, because the first one sold out so quickly, Bertie Ahern didn't give him permission to do a second one or something, and so we wrote a letter to them, and we put it like a little parcel together with Tato crisps and Barry's tea and and a postcard or something in it, and a copy of the Wall's first album, High Low, and we'd one for each member of the band, and we sent it with this letter saying, hope the tour is going well, lads. Mind your back when you're lifting the amps into the van, and all that kind of stuff. And so apparently they got it anyway. And it was a couple of months later, Joe got a call here in Dublin, and it was from an agent in the UK asking were we free on September 22nd or whatever the date was to play Slane Castle. And he thought it was somebody, a crank call. He thought it was someone messing around. And he says, who the fuck is this? You know, come on, Owen, who is it? And it was I can't remember who the agency was, but it was U2's European agent. And so they gave us a slot in Slane, opening up in Slane. And it was amazing. It was, you know, it was a great thing to do, great crowd. That day, the vibe was amazing. Ireland beat Holland to get into the World Cup. We ended up that night celebrating with the Irish team in Lily's Bordello. And I'll never forget Roy Keane singing. Eamon Dunphy had cajoled Roy eventually to come up to the piano. Paul Harrington was on the piano, and they were all going. Dunphy was coordinating this sing song, and Niall Quinn had been up singing "Boule Vogue," and then Dunphy managed to get Roy Keane up. And I remember, like, the whole place was like, "What is Keano going to sing?" You know, and he whispered down to Paul Harrington. And then he starts singing Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind.
Wow.
And yeah, in a really soft voice. And then people started to sort of chat, because there's about 8 verses in that song. People started to chat a bit, including Rory, the drummer in our band. And Dunphy came up and gave him a clatter. He says, shut up, there's a man singing. Respect.
Steve, what so around that time, I mean, I said there was, you know, great music, great, and there was about, you know, 15, 16 years, I mean, obviously interspersed, but there was, like, you were on the road for, you know, a long time between the Stunning and the Wolves. But then, I mean, I know you've kind of done bits and pieces before, like, you know, shorts back in the mid-90s or the early 90s. But the acting thing then, how did that kind of start for you? And how did that start again for you?
Yeah. I think there was a couple of things. It was finding it really hard, just, I suppose, keeping the walls going. It was just really difficult when you're not getting traction with records, you know. We were struggling to get airplay here in Ireland. We'd released a couple of singles that I thought were amazing, but radio airplay was just pathetic. And that's something that I still go on about, you know. There was just very little support. It was like, I almost felt there was that attitude, oh, these guys have been around for years, you know what I mean? It's like, they're still here, roll eyes to heaven. And I thought we were putting out better music than ever, but we just couldn't seem to get traction with it. And so, you know, various members of the band, like Rory, our drummer, started playing Bellix One. He plays a hosier now, but he was playing Bellix One. And we were basically saying, encouraging everybody, look, if you get an offer to play with everyone, go ahead and do it, you know. Don't be sacrificing anything for us, you know. So everybody started to do different things and getting jobs, because, I mean, there was no money coming in. And Joe started working in BIM. And then it turned out for a while then I was the only one that kind of didn't have anything else. And I was still trying to coordinate, because the Stunning had started to gig again at this stage. And so I'm trying to coordinate gigs. When can we book gigs? And the lads in the Stunning play with different people as well, and they work with different people. Derek the guitar player, works with Tommy Tiernan.
Yeah.
Jimmy's playing with Christy Moore now a long time. He's a percussionist in Christy's band. And so I found myself, you know, I'd be looking up Tommy Tiernan's website and Christy's website to see when the lads were free and all that. And after like a year of doing that, I thought, what the hell am I doing? You know, I started trying to, you know, work around other people's successful careers.
Yeah.
And in the space of a week, I met 2 people that had been working in the Druid Theatre when I was there all those years ago in Galway. One was Maureen Hughes, who's now a successful casting agent in Dublin, based in Dublin. And she said to me, why did you ever give up acting? You know, and she said, we're going to run a 4-day acting workshop down in the factory in Barrow Street. And I remember the factory from when it was rehearsal rooms. And after the recession, after the crash in 2008 or so, a load of film directors took over it, and Maureen moved her casting office in there. And she said they were going to run a 4-day screen acting workshop. Would I be interested in attending? And I said, absolutely. So I signed up for it and did the 4-day workshop, and was absolutely got the bug in a big way again. And it was like, now I know I really need to give this a second shot. I enjoyed it so much. And so I was like the oldest one in the class. They were all in their 20s, early 20s or whatever. And so Jack Rayner actually was one of the actors. He's doing very well now. And Jack, a lot of the actors said, look, will we continue to meet up and keep this going? So Jack formed a Facebook page, a private Facebook page, and we all communicated via that. And we'd share script ideas, and someone would say, look, I've got a script here. I've got a scene from Good Will Hunting or something. I need 2 more people. So we'd go to the factory. We met every Tuesday night, and we'd work on these scenes and everything. And then the film directors there started to get involved with the actors. They took an interest in this. And then it was called the Dublin Actors Studio. I think Jack had named it that. And so that's gone on to be Bow Street now. That's what Bow Street is in over in Smithfield.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got back into it. I did that workshop and really enjoyed it. So I kept that workshop. I was involved in that for about 2 years. So, going in and, filming scenes, and I hadn't even gotten to a point where I was ready to do an audition,
Yeah.
It was sort of, and we had great people coming in and talking to us, everyone from Jim Sheridan to Brendan Gleeson, and an amazing array of actors. And then when they started to run a proper acting course there, they started to bring in some heavy hitters, actors from the States and everything that would be, in Europe. They'd bring them in to talk to the students. And so I just got more and more interested in it and more passionate about it. And I did my first audition. It was like 2 years since I started, and that was for Moon Boy, and I got it. So that was my first gig, and that was in 2012.
Yeah.
And then I started, I think it was a great help to do something that turned out to be so successful and to be associated with it.
Yeah.
And that does, I suppose, help to open the door for other things,
Yeah.
So I think Vikings was next after that. And so yeah, I was lucky in that sense that the couple of early things I got were high profile,
I mean, Moon Boys, like, I think that's going to go down to the seminal kind of piece of, work. But it's so, I mean, a lot of people, like we worked a lot here with Claire Monolly, who was kind of in
yeah, no, Claire.
But yeah, I mean, beautiful writing. I think there's that, and also, for you then to say Vikings was like, but these are kind of series that you got, so it wasn't just kind of going in for a few days doing a bit, like these were kind of long extended. There was time to.
Yeah, well, no, actually, it's kind of the opposite, really, because when you're on those kind of series, you're like, and you kind of feature in 1 or 2 episodes per season or whatever. Yeah. I think I ended up in about 7 or 8 episodes of Vikings. But you're kind of a day player, you come in and you do your scenes, and it can be quite difficult, because you've got to come in and hit the ground running. You've got to know what you're doing. There's no rehearsal or anything.
Yeah.
So you have to pretty much kind of suss out what your character is about and what you're going to, because they happen really fast. Those shows, they're all coming from after filming a battle. It's like, okay, now we're going to do the scene in the banquet hall. You better be, and I've got to have my shit together.
Yeah.
And it all happens quite quickly.
Yeah.
So it's very different. I mean, I've only had one experience of doing a feature film, and that was amazing. I absolutely loved that, because there was some rehearsal beforehand, and there was time, not a whole lot, but there was time to prep the character and everything.
What an extraordinary character to play as well, though. I mean, that's my Foolish Heart.
My Foolish Heart, yeah.
Chet Baker, go back to your family and your record collections back in the day.
Yeah. And so I was well aware, I had a Chet Baker album anyway on vinyl, and CD actually. I have Chet Baker Sings on CD, so I had them years ago. So that was a dream role for me in terms of rising to the challenge, because I knew it had to be good, and I wanted to do Chet Baker justice, you know. So I put a lot of work into the actual audition. And then it took some time before it was confirmed that they were offering me the role, you know, because they were casting for Chet in America. I mean, it would be pretty obvious that that's where you'd start. And so it was a real kind of surprise to me anyway when I was offered the role.
Yeah, I mean, so I suppose, like, I mean, to kind of go back a bit before, I think there's a lot of actors, particularly who work in film, there's kind of one thing kind of doing your days and kind of, you know, your kind of recurring characters. But then, as you say, with Chet, like, it was your film, like, you were carrying this. And I think that, did you feel that pressure, Steve, or was it something that you kind of went?
I did a bit, yeah, I did a bit, because I didn't have the experience of having done a film before. So I kind of didn't even know, like, how am I supposed to prepare for this? You know, I didn't have any reference really. And all I could do is I just sort of, just like every single day, I immersed myself in Chet Baker, you know, going around with, I'd go for long walks, listening to interviews, singing along with songs, trying to mimic and trying to get his voice, his tone of voice, not just singing, but speaking voice was really unusual. It was quite a high timbre to his voice, completely different to mine. And so like I ended up actually, I discovered that by blocking my nose, I could get it, because it sounded like his nose was kind of blocked all the time, you know. And so I did the whole film with sterile swabs up my nose to kind of get that. And that really helped when I could get his voice and his characteristics, the way he sort of, he never really smiled much because his false teeth would fall out. And so there was so many things I had to study, you know, in interviews, little things he did. And, you know, he would replace a laugh with, like this, you know, so he didn't have to move his mouth.
Okay.
And then sometimes you'd see him and he'd have, you know, he would have like a handkerchief out of his pocket, and you know, he would do that, whatever. And what he was actually doing was he's pushing the teeth back up, because it was these false teeth that were broken, and he never got them fixed, and they were constantly always gluing them and everything. And but he would do this sometimes like that. And actually, sometimes I'd keep replaying it, and I'd see he's actually, teeth are slipping down, and he's pushing them back up. So there were all these kind of things, and I didn't know at the time, was I wasting my time looking at all this stuff, you know, instead of, say, learning lines, you know. But I knew I had to get the character right and his gait and everything like that. And just looking back on it, actually, I really did enjoy doing that kind of that research. And thankfully there is a good bit of stuff online about him. There's lots of performances and all, you know, so I could see the way he sat, exactly how he held a trumpet, and the angle at which he played, and how much his cheeks came out. You know, there were all these little things.
And do you find, like, do you find it difficult watching yourself back? Like, is something that, from obviously coming from a band to movie, are you able to watch yourself in the stuff you've done?
Generally, I find it uncomfortable, but with the Chet Baker thing, I didn't mind so much, because they put an awful lot of prosthetic makeup on me. Because Chet, even though he was a similar age to me now when he died, you know, when he fell or jumped out of the window in Amsterdam, but he looked 20 years older. He was really completely ravaged from the drugs.
Yeah.
And so they did an awful lot of prosthetic makeup on me. There was various tests to get it right. So there was, you know, prosthetics in my forehead, nose, cheeks, prosthetic chin, and all of that. And it was it was like a 2-hour operation every morning. So it's kind of funny when I look at it, I'm not really seeing myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the mask there, even though it's very well done. But I don't, when I look at it, I don't feel that's me, you know.
Yeah. And then obviously Klondike as well was another one. That kind of, again, brilliant series. And that But
great,
that must have been great crack to do as well, was it?
great fun. And it was shot down in around Oughterard in Connemara, and with fantastic Irish actors and a lot of the actors from Galway, from the area,
Yeah.
Irish speakers and everything. And so I met great people on that. It was a real shame that they didn't get to do the third series, because it was written and everything. And it's just a really interesting time in history as well, because that Klondike Gold Rush it all took place in about 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And it was so well done, actually. The landscape in
Mm.
Connemara, it looked like it could have been the Yukon Delta. It was just so realistic. The set they built was brilliant. And they had it was on the grounds of the Glengowla mines.
I
So
know
they
it.
had
Yeah,
they had a mine there and all to do.
yeah,
It was just an amazing location.
yeah, yeah.
And I really thought that series was great. It punched well above its weight.
It did.
And it's just a shame they didn't get to do the third season.
And then recently, you've been obviously The Witcher and Raised by Wolves. Then kind of is, it's been like your acting career has been very successful. And obviously, in the middle of the rebellion, playing the baddie.
Yeah. I end up sort of now playing a lot of baddies, the guy that he's only on screen a few minutes, and you kind of know he's not going to last. Yeah, I've played quite a few of them. Actually, the one I finished off last year was a good year for me, actually, and I finished off last year doing an RTE drama, and it's actually the longest gig that I've been on so far. I think it's going to be a 10-part drama, or is it 8? I'm not sure. Called The Southwesterlies, and it's the kind of thing that, unlike normal people, it's the kind of drama that you could sit down and watch with your mother comfortably. Yeah. So it's a bit less risque, but it's good fun, and it's kind of lighthearted, But I was just so relieved, because my character managed to get from the beginning to the end without getting killed.
Knowing what's going to happen now, yeah.
With my tackle intact as well,
Yeah, absolutely. Come here, and I won't keep it much longer, but also, Steve, the sense of, like I just say, the Stunning were reformed, like the band, we got the band back together again, and in the last 15, 16 years, there's been high profile gigs, and the new music, and still a huge recognition of a wider, that's some canon there that you built up there. Do you still enjoy that gigging? Do you still enjoy?
Yeah. It's better than ever,
right?
To be honest, I think the band are better than ever. The band are playing really well. We've been doing an awful lot of festival gigs, and unfortunately they've been all cancelled this summer. Yeah. And I think the band is just really suited to festivals as well, because it's just musically, we've got, a really good live set. We've added a couple of new songs to it in the last couple of years, a couple of new original songs, and that just fit in really well. We've also throw in a couple of wall songs now as well, that just, like The Bright and Shining Sun. There's a song from the Walls album High Low called Some Kind of a Girl, and that just completely fits with the Stunning, with the brass and everything. And the gigs have just been brilliant, and I love playing these festivals around the country where you've got all ages at them. Because I find like the kids and all that are just, because the music is quite immediate to them, and they just really enjoy it, and their folks are there who sort of, we were like their college band, So it's been great playing with the band.
But it's also, I think, what's interesting, and I'm kind of was watching a few clips on YouTube there the last couple of weeks. What you have, and I think it's an interesting thing, one of my pet things I noticed about a lot of bands, that as they get older, their songs organically seem to slow down a tad, just a tad. But years haven't at all. In fact, like, it's and that's a real compliment to yourself, particularly live. Like, there's a sense that, there's a tightness there that hasn't aged.
Yeah, well, it's funny, because with the we've always had a problem writing slow songs, and I think it goes back. I mean, we've had these conversations, even when I remember when the Walls we did some gigs in Australia with Crowded House. Crowded House had just reformed, and you know, we're great friends with Nick, the bass player who lives in Ireland, and Nick offered us if we wanted to open for them on some of the Australian dates, and we just had to do it. You know, they hadn't played together in since they'd broken up, sort of like the Stunning thing. So we played in these massive arenas, and every night we would, after our set, we'd go out and watch the Crowded House. And they were just incredible. But they had these beautiful mid-tempo ballads like "Don't Dream It's Over," "Hey Now, Hey Now," and what's the other one? There's these, but there's a load of these classic, and they're mid-tempo. And every night we would say, we've got to write some of these mid-tempo kind of, you know, torch in the air, lighter in the air kind of ballads. And we just don't seem to be able to, you know. So that's actually, now I should be trying that now during the lockdown, to write a lockdown ballad.
Well, actually, before I let you go, it's worth kind of noting for anyone to find this on the internet in 10 years' time that we are at the end of May now, but we are kind of, you know, in our second month of kind of lockdown because of a coronavirus pandemic. Yeah. Particularly, I mean, you know, it's a big conversation in the wider art sector, but in the live music and live theatre and, you know, and filmmaking, you know, there's a problem now going forward in planning, and, you know, so your whole summer's gone. That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the COVID payment now, like many other musicians that I know, but they're talking about cutting that off, which is going to be very difficult for this household, you know, because there's two of us here. My partner works in film; she's a costume designer, and that's all stopped as well. So I'm just hoping now that the government reviews this situation, because there's a chance that we may not be able to do any gigs at all till this year is out, you know. I don't know how film and television are going to resume, and how they're going to manage that, what kind of rules are going to be in place. So if we're being disallowed to work, then there has to be, we have to receive some kind of payment, you know what I mean? Because we still have the same bills.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's hugely problematic in you know, the society now, and I think there's an opportunity, I suppose, in a way, to reframe arts and entertainment and, you know, music and live theatre's relationship with the public by kind of going, you know, people can't work. It's not like, you know, you know, Stunning would have had gigs up in Christmas into next year, but it's kind of like that's impossible now. So to say there would be no support for that would be absolute nonsense.
Yeah. No, there needs to be support. Your mic has gone way down in level. I can't hear you. Whatever. Yeah, it was plenty loud, and then it's just dipped now. It's
maybe it's the 10 cents in the meter now. Tell him.
Yeah. Oh, I've got to show you something. I've got a quick plug to do. Look. This is what we've just published. It's the it's the Paradise Songbook. Let me check my volume here in case that's. Oh no, mine's up. It's the Paradise Songbook. So we spent a lot of the year working on this. It's got all the story behind the making of the album.
Oh wow!
All the people that were involved in it, the singles. There's Chris O'Brien, the producer, down in the studio in Ringsend, and then it's got all the guitar versions with like the lots of handwritten stuff about, you know, the stories behind where the song came from, what basically sparked off the song, and then these are all hand done. They're all drawn by hand with notes, little playing instructions and everything, you know. Can you see that there?
Yeah.
And it's great. And so all the songs are in there with the bonus tracks and everything, photographs, and that's actually I think that's in Joe in Boston or New York, National Stadium in Dublin, and then there's all the piano versions as well.
Is that available now?
Yeah, so that's that just went on sale last week from if people go to the store on thestunning.net.
Perfect.
And it'll take them to the link. It's shipped by fulfilled and shipped by Dublin Vinyl.
That's beautiful.
So you can buy you can buy it as like you can buy it. They're doing a bundle with the vinyl together, or you can buy them separate.
Brilliant.
So it's a nice companion piece to the album, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And
nice present.
And a perfect COVID purchase, you know, as I kind of reach out to it.
Yeah, because you can actually, you can get your guitar out and you can actually learn a couple of new party songs.
Well, that's a nice segue back to the beginning of the interview where we were talking about you and the Beatles complete book. And I think it's amazing, you know, from that young lad of 10, 11, 12 playing along to that now having your own, you know, that's
yeah.
I'll put the link in the blurb on the YouTube thing for that, for people to kind of click on to go and buy that as well. So everyone should buy that.
Yeah.
Thanks very, very much for doing this, and I wish you well, and I hope to see you out on the road again soon.
Yeah, and likewise with the theatre, I hope you get to open soon in some shape or form. You know, everybody's scratching their heads at the moment. No one knows how this is going to work out.
Listen, thanks again, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. All the best.